All right, so I'm wanting to introduce and talk about a concept I call the welcoming feminine. I'm going to talk about what it is, how I'm defining it, why I think it's important, and why, perhaps if you already resonate with something in this term and in this language, it might not be familiar to you. So first out, I want to say that it is a little bit strange for me to talk in these kinds of terms. I don't tend to talk in archetypes or more mystical phrases in my work. I tend more towards the scientific and although the spiritual is woven in. And these concepts would be woven in the background as well. And I do have some challenges around talking about them, but I believe they're really important and I believe they can be really helpful. Like any kind of model or frame, they are not reality itself. They describe reality and we can use shared language to try and get a bit deeper into understanding ourselves. And I think that those of us who are on the conscious path, be it through a psychological framework, be it through a spiritual framework, be it through anything else, who are wanting to live intentional and meaningful lives that have been well investigated are familiar with this terminology. And the idea that while masculine is associated traditionally with men and feminine with women, both men and women have both masculine and feminine aspects. These are aspects, these are energies, these are experiences or polarities that we're talking about here. And the welcoming feminine is one aspect of them. So as we've begun in our cultural conversations, in our spiritual, psychological conversations to explore more deeply what is masculine and feminine, how can this be helpful to us, more nuances have begun to arise, just like over the course of our lives, as a woman or as a man, whatever you identify as, you will have phases and stages, and your energy will get expressed differently in different ways when you're younger, middle-aged, and older. The same with femininity and masculinity, with the feminine energies, with the masculine energies. I use the plural form, the S at the end, that there are multiple forms in both these primary categories of polarity. And traditionally, we know the very rough definition is that the masculine has the active principle and the feminine, the receptive principle. And then there are a whole bunch of things around this that we can look at through different philosophers and spiritual traditions over time. But those are our fundamental baselines in which we understand these. The one philosopher who I've seen talk about multiple aspects to each of these energies is Charles Eisenstein. So you could go check out him if you're interested in this. It's a little bit different from the way what I'm going to present today, but he talks about polarities within the polarities and each masculine having a yin and a yang. So again, within it, a subdivision of a more masculine expression of the masculine and a more feminine expression of the masculine, a yang or a yin, and same with the feminine. So what is the welcoming feminine? To me, it would be perhaps falling within a category of a more active expression of the feminine, in the sense that whilst there is the open space of welcome, welcome isn't just a letting things in. Welcome is an active greeting. Welcome is an act of saying who you are is okay. And as I've begun to discuss this idea and explore it with different people, one of the most impactful metaphors that came out of those conversations for me in understanding what I'm trying to get at here was fire. And if we think about the active principle and the masculine energy being related to this kind of movement, we can think about fire that's moving, and this feminine principle, more like a campfire. So there is containment and there is warmth and there is welcome, and you come into the light and you sit there and you get to just be. It's not moving in any direction, but it's energetic and it's warm and it's bright. I'm looking at my notes and pausing without my glasses on. So what I wanted to talk about was how this came about, which has been a really interesting journey on a number of levels, both in my own journey and then my journey as a coach, as someone in the therapeutic community, which is that, and in the entrepreneurial community. So as I began to collect and begin to really shape and articulate my own take on the healing journey, on the growth journey, and my philosophies and beliefs around it, I had come from a position of really wanting to participate in healing for women in particular, because of my own journey and because that's what I saw there was a real need for in the world. And I began to make a lot of content that spoke about not feeling safe in the body, nervous system regulation, feeling more empowered, more emotionally intelligent, more capable of regulating the system and taking active steps forward in the world. And I got a lot of feedback from men who were watching my content that they were relating to what I was saying and they were finding it helpful, and they were curious about why I felt moved to specifically speak to women when for them they felt like it really related to their experience. So this got me curious. And one thing that was present for me at that time was a sense that I didn't really want to work with men back then. I felt like with everything that's been going on in the planet, in our culture and in our society. So again, I feel funny talking about masculine and feminine in this way, just full disclosure, even though I'm also enjoying it, I feel funny about it because I come from, my background is, staunch feminist, grown up that way, and continue to believe that there are structural inequalities in the world that disadvantage women. I still believe this, and I see that within the cultural conversation, there is more to be explored and more to be discussed. But because of those perspectives, my own experience and my own philosophy at that time, I didn't want to help men anymore. I felt men should help men. And one of the things that men were asking me for help with, or expressing the need for help with, was ironically something that they were also being asked to do by women. And I'm speaking here in real general terms, right? I'm not going to get into the complexities of gender. So if that's not cool for you, I understand. Come back later. Maybe we can talk about it in a different way then. The issue that was going on was that these men were being asked to go deeper into their vulnerability, go deeper into their emotional capacity. But of course, as many of us know, culturally, I don't know about your culture, certainly here in Australia, this is not something that men were familiar with doing in this lifetime and in the generations prior. So it was not something that was explicitly made part of their experience. And it is traditionally been something that is a little easier for women to grasp for a number of reasons. One of them conditioning, and there are other things going on as well. So when men would talk to me about this, I would offer them compassion and say, go help each other. I don't want to help you anymore. Women don't want to help anymore. We feel like we've done enough. Very justified, very fair. And for me personally, this came from my own experience of being on the receiving end of a very toxic expression of masculinity, of a lot of wounded men, and a lot of harm had come my way. So I had my own traumas and my own things going on. And the men who were telling me that they were having a difficult time, that they were struggling to find role models for what the healthy masculine expression needed to look like, could look like in today's world. I'm particularly talking about since Me Too and these issues were really becoming present. They were expressing that they were finding it was really helpful to go to men's groups and still are. But although there were shifts, there was still something missing. And for the ones who are my clients now, I've since changed my position, which I'll go into a little bit more in a moment. There's still a desire to have a version of masculinity that meets the feminine in a different way, and to have more fulfillment and connection in their relationships with women in general, friendships, colleagues, partners. So this is one issue that's been coming up. And actually, I think I'll share at this point. So I got my client's permission to share this anonymously. I won't say his name, but this is a client whose feedback about doing this work and experience about doing this work was very moving to me and added power to why I want to share this concept and these ideas and spread this idea with you. So I'm going to put my glasses on for this one. Following the session, and actually the reason why you may not have heard of this concept, I'm going to go into the deeper philosophical, cultural trends in a moment, and the fact that it's not familiar because it's absent, but also it's not been named. I just named it in a session with this client. And following that, he says, a part of me is building trust in the welcoming feminine. I might even comment on this as we go. So part of this difficulty that the men who were approaching me were having is that they were being asked to do this work, to get more fluidity in their capacity, or fluency in their capacity to be with, feel their emotions, and not get frustrated and act out in violence through their words or through their deeds, as we know is a problem in our culture, but to go inward, and then to be able to also express that and connect to that in women. And when they were doing that, they were then receiving anger and criticism because it was a fairly new skill and they weren't that good at it yet. So that, combined with the very justified anger of women for what we've been through for centuries, was creating a real catch-22. And when I named this the welcoming feminine with this client, and we started to go through this process, the first thing that happened was that he looked at me like, what is that? When I said it, I said, oh, you haven't met the welcoming feminine yet. And he was like, I don't even know what that is. It certainly wasn't present in the experience that I've had with the women around me in my life. And so we've begun to explore this. And this is what he said to me as he started to shift. A part of me is building trust in the welcoming feminine. And so here we're talking about energies, right? We're talking about something that lives inside each one of us and lives in our world, not just in women or in men. She's been there my whole life and I could sense the difference. And now we have a name for her. I am crying with relief. I don't have to defend myself anymore. Here's the campfire. You're welcome. Just be. You're okay as you are. How exhausting that was, defending who I was, my world, and my masculinity. I'm realizing as I sit with this welcoming feminine that I am more relaxed with all women. My relationships and communications with women in the office have become easier and lighter, and I'm less judgmental. A part of me cries internally from relief. It's extraordinary. I can gradually let down my defenses. She exists and she's expanding. What a freedom. No more self-protection needed. Literally, I open more and relax. I acknowledge it's growing in me. It's a relief. Trust can open now. Growth can happen. So here's the key. In order to grow, in order to learn, in order to change, we have to be accepted for where we're at. And this is what many of us missed in the early stages. So the welcoming feminine, I would consider to be part of the process of mothering and nurturing, but somewhat different, okay? So that would be our first exposure to it, would be when the parent brain says to the baby brain, you're okay. I am stable, steady, and wide open for you to experience whatever it is. So in other psychological models, we could look at secure attachment. We could look at it in all these different ways. But I think when we're looking at our dynamics with the opposite sex, the other sexes, we want to be aware of this. And the fact that we didn't get that experience of you are okay as you are means that our brains don't learn. We can't learn when there's criticism, judgment. So we need to have that space. We need to have that space within ourselves, and we need to offer that space to each other. Because if our brain never had it, it needs another brain who's got it to learn how to have it. If we never had it, it's not there, right? So my own journey is one in which I had to meet it. So I want to point this out because the welcoming feminine is missing for all of us. And there is a cultural context for that the feminine in our world has not been respected, has been dominated, and our mothering has been interfered with and denatured. So the mothers that we had, many of us had, were unable to do this through no fault of their own, through what they either received when they were growing up or what they were told to do, which was to put this block to this welcoming acceptance of everything that a little child is, and to judge or to shame or to chastise. So if we had those experiences, then we don't get to grow into a mature and ripened version of who we are. So as I said earlier, I believe I've said earlier, experienced a lot of harm from myself in my own journey from immature and wounded men. And I didn't want to be offering anything to help them at that point. As my own experience and exposure to the welcoming feminine shifted, and mine was offered initially through the gaze of a female healer, a woman, and then deepened and really experienced down to the core of my being and my nervous system through connection to the earth, where I felt like it really lived. Things reshaped inside of me as my own story shifted and changed. I began to embody this for myself. And in my work with clients, I consciously and subconsciously make the effort to embody it for them and with them. This experience has been mostly missing and continues to be mostly missing for most of us most of the time. There are plenty of people, I'm sure, that have had the experience, and if so, maybe they relate to what I'm saying. And so the fact that you may not have heard of it, or when you hear it, there's some kind of intuitive yes, but like, what is that? The closest I've come to it is the naming of the opposite, the mother wound. So the mothering being a wider category under which sits the welcoming feminine. Once all of us, women, men, get to actually experience and embody and feel and be held in the presence of the welcoming feminine, in the presence of that brightness and that warmth. And there are lots of ways to do this, which I teach and practice. We get to feel much deeper into our vulnerability, into our authenticity, and how to be safe with that in an actively warm and welcome presence. This is a presence that says, come in, sit down, and be. You are okay as you are. Deep in here. I think that we all, as I've said, all need a bit of this. If this is resonant for you, let me know what you think. I love to hear your comments, love to hear your questions, love to hear your criticisms. They are all welcome. I will examine, think, digest, process, and try to respond. Everything that you offer to me is a contribution that I can try to use to get better in my practice, get better in my content, and support you and all of us better and better. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope this has been useful.